Unraveled mysteries lie in wait. She texted me earlier, running tardy. Her meeting with venue personnel stretched out. I didn't respond. I was seated in Windsor Hotel's lobby, waiting as elevator doors repeatedly swung open and shut. A quarter of an hour had passed. My attorney was en route. We had papers to finalize. The Windsor wasn't picked by chance. It was the location where our shared card showed charges twice within the past month, identical room number on both occasions, 305. I questioned her about it the first time, and she claimed it was work-related, concerning event space consultations, a plausible explanation given her line of work. However, 2 weeks later, an unknown number called. Your wife checked in with him again. Room 305. I'm sorry. I remained frozen for a full minute before setting the phone aside without moving. 3 days ago, another message arrived from the same number, room 305, 2:17 p.m., indicating the same man and the same room. This is when I contacted my lawyer. This is when I started gathering documents. Business partnership contracts, account access permissions, and vendor agreements documents signed with my former business partner Eric 5 years back upon opening our coffee shop. Eric was a man I met 6 years ago at a small-scale entrepreneurial fair. He had an enticing pitch, while I had a detailed business plan. We sealed the deal in a convention center hallway, launching our shop 8 months later. Eric managed customer interactions, while I oversaw operations. The arrangement functioned well. My wife admired him from the beginning, remarking that he was humorous and made everything appear effortless. I didn't give it much thought at first. Eric had a knack for making everyone feel at ease, which is why customers returned. Recently, my wife started visiting our shop more frequently under the pretext of supporting us. She brought her laptop and worked in a corner table. During his breaks, Eric would join her. They shared laughter, and she would occasionally touch his arm when speaking. I initially dismissed it as innocent, but then the charges began to appear. The Windsor Hotel on 2 occasions, both Thursdays afternoons. I held back from speaking to her, instead choosing to observe. She began adopting a new style on Thursdays, well-coiffed hair and wearing an unfamiliar scent. When I inquired about her destination, she'd respond with venue walkthrough, claiming a specific client required her attention. She'd be away for 3 hours. Upon examining her calendar, I found no scheduled appointments. That's when the first anonymous text arrived. I was unaware of its sender, but I knew it held truth. I remained silent towards both parties. I continued attending to the store, handling orders, and nodding during Eric's discussions about expanding the menu or opening a second location. At home, I maintained normalcy, asking about her day, listening to her chatter about clients, venues, and timelines. She didn't suspect any changes. However, I gradually transferred funds, tiny sums, from our shared account into one she couldn't access. Sufficient for future implications, yet not enough to trigger alerts. I revisited our business agreement and read it diligently. A clause Eric had insisted on years ago was prominent. Should one partner decide to depart, the remaining partner would have the initial chance to purchase. However, any breach of moral conduct clauses or actions damaging business reputation would result in forfeiture of equity. I assumed this provision wouldn't be necessary. Now I sought a means to enforce it. I began jotting down details. Dates, times, allegations, the text messages from unknown numbers. I captured everything by screenshot. Then I contacted a lawyer with whom I had collaborated during lease negotiations. I explained my requirement for legal documentation. A smooth exit, minimal fuss. He assured me he could prepare the documents within a week. I set the meeting for Thursday, the same venue, the same hotel. That morning she gave me a goodbye kiss as she left, saying I'll be back by 5. After she departed, I drove to the Windsor. The lobby was tranquil with marble floors and soft music. A few people in business attire sat near the windows. I picked a chair offering a clear view of the elevators. My lawyer texted at 2:15 p.m., running 10 minutes late due to traffic. I informed him it was fine. 2:20 p.m., I spotted Eric walking through the main entrance, avoiding a glance around. He walked directly towards the elevators. The coat he wore was the same one I'd seen him leave the shop with earlier that day. He hit the button, waited, and as the doors opened, he stepped in. I watched the floor numbers rise. Reached the 3rd floor, the door remained closed for 5 minutes. Then my phone vibrated, another unknown number. The message read, Room 305, 2:17 p.m. I set the phone face down on the table. My attorney arrived at 2:30 p.m. He sat opposite me and pushed a folder across the table. It contained documents for the dissolution of partnership, division of assets, and the invocation of a morality clause, everything I'd requested. Are you certain about this? He inquired. I signed the first page without replying. We went over the rest, initialed, signed, dated. He gathered the papers and rose. "I'll file these today," he said. I nodded. He departed. I remained seated. At 3:15 p.m., the elevator doors opened. Eric emerged first, followed by my wife. When she was adjusting her hairstyle, he was engrossed in his phone screen. Neither noticed me as they moved towards the main entrance in close proximity without touching, a closeness born out of routine. Eric spoke. She chuckled softly, almost discreetly. They halted near the door, and he leaned towards her for a quick kiss. Unmoved, she didn't retreat. Only then did she notice me. She froze, and Eric followed her gaze. His face lost all expression. I remained seated, unmoving. Two, adjusting her hair, he checking his phone. Neither took notice of my presence as they walked together towards the front entrance, close but not touching, a distance dictated by habit. Eric spoke. She giggled softly, almost inaudibly. They paused near the door, and he leaned for a brief kiss. She didn't flinch. Upon noticing me, her movement ceased. Eric stayed behind. She opened her mouth to speak, but closed it instead. I stood up, informed her about the filed divorce papers that she would be served tomorrow. Looking past her, I instructed Eric to check his email in an hour as our partnership had ended. Picking up my phone, I departed through the side exit. She called out my name, but I didn't pause. The door closed behind me, and her voice echoed through the glass, muted and distant. I continued walking, reached the bank, moved funds from our shared account into mine, and closed it after confirming with the teller. The next destination was the store. Eric wasn't present yet, so I spoke to the manager in her office about needing to discuss something. She sat while I stood, and I informed her that Eric would no longer be working effective immediately. I would handle operations alone for the time being. There were no questions asked, only a nod in response. I altered the locks on the back office and updated the POS system's passcode. Contacted our accountant to block Eric's access to the business account. He queried about the situation, but I responded that it had been resolved. By the time I arrived home, it was nearly 6, and her car was absent from the driveway. I gathered her belongings, clothes, toiletries, items from her nightstand, and packed them in boxes, keeping them in the garage. While sealing the last box, my phone vibrated with a text message from her. "We need to talk." I chose not to respond. Another message arrived 5 minutes later. "Please," I didn't respond again. "I will clarify the situation." I blocked her phone call and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. An email from Eric arrived 20 minutes ago titled, "This is ridiculous." I ignored it, deleting it instead. She arrived at our house around 8. Her car's sound was heard, followed by a door slamming and an unsuccessful key attempt. She knocked, then pounded. I remained stationary on the couch. She requested a conversation through the door, saying she wouldn't leave until we spoke. I turned on the TV with loud volume to drown her out. After 20 minutes, her footsteps retreated to her car. The engine started, but she stayed for a while before driving off. The next day, Eric visited the workshop. My manager called me from the back, saying Eric wanted to speak with me. I stepped out front where he stood by the counter, hands in his pockets, attempting to appear calm. He initiated conversation, suggesting we could resolve the issue and things didn't have to be this way. I requested he depart, yet he remained stationary. I contacted authorities, reporting an intruder. He exited prior to their arrival. Subsequently, my legal representative contacted me. Eric filed a retaliatory lawsuit. He asserted that I lacked justification for employing the morality clause. He announced his intention to oppose the dissolution. My lawyer inquired if I had evidence. I forwarded him the screenshots, bank statements, and texts from an unidentified number. An hour later, he called back. He confirmed the evidence was robust. Then he paused. He mentioned that there was another matter. He said she had filed a response to the divorce petition. She demanded half of all assets, the house, the business, alimony. Her lawyer alleged I abandoned her without cause. He questioned my honesty and integrity. My attorney inquired if I wished for mediation. I declined. He warned it could become complex. I conveyed my indifference. The court date was set for 3 weeks hence. Meanwhile, the store began losing patrons. Not many, but enough to notice. Customers inquired about Eric's whereabouts, expressing their fondness for him. Few frequent customers ceased visiting. I chose not to disclose the reason, continued operating the establishment. One afternoon, a woman entered and requested coffee. Around mid-40s, professionally inclined. She sat by the window without drinking, merely observing me. After approximately 10 minutes, she approached the counter and pushed a business card towards me, a private investigator. She informed me that Eric hired her 4 months prior, tasked with tracking my movements and recording my schedule. He suspected I aimed to oust him and desired ammunition if events turned unfavorable. For 2 weeks, she trailed me, discovering nothing of consequence. However, she noticed my wife appearing at the shop more frequently. Upon closer observation, she witnessed them together at the Windsor. She shared her findings with Eric, who instructed her to halt her investigations. Claimed he no longer required her services, yet she persisted in observing. It was then that she started texting me, inquired about the motive. She stated she refuses to work for such individuals. Then she presented an envelope and departed. I opened it at home later that day. Pictures, timestamps, dates, photos of Eric and my spouse entering then exiting a hotel. One photo particularly shocked me. Taken in the hotel parking lot, my wife was leaning against Eric's car with his hand on her waist. She was laughing. The timestamp indicated it was 5 months prior before any charges appeared on our account. I sat there, fixated on it for a long while. Then I called my attorney, sharing I had more evidence. He suggested bringing it to his office the next morning. In the morning, I drove over promptly. He meticulously went through the envelope, scrutinizing every photo, reading each date. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and informed me this alteration made a significant difference. He asserted Eric's rebuttal wouldn't hold, and the morality clause was now watertight. He inquired if I wished to proceed. I confirmed yes. He filed an amended divorce petition the same day. A week later, Eric's lawyer contacted mine. He said Eric desired a settlement. He would relinquish his stake in the business without a struggle or court battle. My legal representative inquired about my intentions. After a brief contemplation, I directed him to turn down the proposal. He inquired for confirmation. I specified that I desired it documented and submitted for public viewing. He warned it would become public knowledge. I acknowledged that was the objective. The hearing was scheduled 2 weeks ahead. There was no communication from Eric afterward. However, my spouse called, but I did not respond. She left a message suggesting dialogue before the hearing, asserting things didn't need to be this way. I discarded it. The divorce proceedings took place first with her absence at the trial. Her attorney attempted to argue abandonment. My lawyer provided the evidence, photographs, timestamps, hotel records. The judge approved the divorce with no alimony or business division. She received half of the house's equity. That was it. 2 days later came the partnership hearing in a compact courtroom, with a judge, lawyers, and Eric seated opposite me with his attorney. I sat across from him, and the proceedings followed. My attorney presented all the evidence, photos, bank statements, texts, the investigator's timeline. Eric's lawyer attempted to dispute the clause's relevance, claiming it involved private matters. The judge reviewed the partnership agreement and its related clause. He pronounced it aloud, then looked at Eric. After a brief break, he made a ruling. The partnership was dissolved, and Eric forfeited his share of the business. I retained everything. Eric avoided eye contact when it ended. He simply stood up and walked out. I remained seated until everyone else had left. Upon leaving the courtroom, my attorney congratulated me on making the right decision. I didn't feel like a winner. I drove back to the store, unlocked the door, and flipped the open sign. A customer arrived at noon, ordered the regular drink, inquired about Eric's return, and I replied negatively. He acknowledged my response without further questions. I prepared his beverage and handed it to him. He left. I stood behind the counter, gazing around the vacant shop. The store was now under my control, but it felt more barren than ever before. Appreciate you sticking around until now. What are your thoughts about this narrative? Feel free to share your views below.